Thank you. I'm sorry I don't have a title because I was not said that we need a title, but the title is going to be something about economy and social impacts of tourism. And I'm essentially going to show you, first of all, why so many parts of Croatia are motivated to enter a more intensive tourist activity. And then I'm going to go lower and lower to the local level. I will show you some examples of the cities of Split and Zadar, who are already past the process that Rijeka is, I would say, is now entering. So without further ado, let's begin with the national question, not the national question that usually comes to mind, but the question of a national level. So when we talk about the new EU countries, we are usually talking about highly centralized countries that usually also concentrate the resources at the metropolis, at the capital. Croatia, being a tourist country, is in that sense slightly specific and I would say different in a sense that the coast is another area of the country which attracts both capital and if it doesn't attract population, it does not lose it at the same pace as the rest of the country. We know that the country has lost some 10% of population between the census in 2011-2021, but not at the sea, immediately by the sea, and not in the capital of Zagreb. So when we look at what happens in Croatia, apart from, as I said, this process of metropolization, we also have the process of littoralization, which means that there is a concentration of capital, population, and economic activity by the sea. When I say by the sea, I mean literally by the sea, and not in the counties that are attached to the sea. I will show you later what it's all about. And now, another map of, well, the first map of Croatia for today. I think it's the only one, really. Okay, so this is the GDP growth in Croatia compared to the city of Zagreb in the last 20 years. Red counties, 17 of them, had a slower growth than the city of Zagreb. The green ones had faster growth, so they increased the GDP compared in percentage. I didn't say that they are richer than Zagreb, it's just they grew faster than the city of Zagreb. As you can see, all three of them are in Dalmatia. It's Zadar County, Šibenik, Knin County, and Dubrovnik-Neretva County, with Istria and Split Dalmatia County being very slightly below the Zagreb average, and Rijeka, how it's translated, Primorje and Goranska, okay. Primorje Goranska County is the only one that grew significantly slower than the city of Zagreb, which can explain to an extent, A, by the lack of tourism, and B, it can explain why it's so motivated to enter the tourism game, albeit very late. You know, it's 30 years since the end of the war, and what we can see here is a process that clearly shows why the littoral is motivated to enter the tourism. I will show you some other lines just to compare the GDP growth. As you can see, it says most developed versus underdeveloped. The gap between the three most developed counties, which are the city of Zagreb, the Rijeka County, and Istria County, is quite significant compared to the least developed counties in Croatia. And now I would just like to briefly ask you to concentrate on the blue and green lines. What you see here is two Croatian provinces, Dalmatia and Slavonia. One is, as you have seen before, economically growing faster than the rest of Croatia, and the other one is actually on a downfall in a sense of demography, in a sense of economy, in literally every sense you can imagine. And another argument in the sense why there is a strong motivation for tourism. So the predominantly agricultural region of Slavonia is in a significant decline. Predominantly industrial city of Rijeka is also in decline. Demographically, of course, we are not talking about the outskirts of Rijeka, which actually are gaining population. But the fact is that the Rijeka County is the only one that doesn't really grow as fast as the rest of the Adriatic area. So I understand the motives for increased tourism. However, we also have a regional question. So what happens in the Croatian regions? We have, a country in which 95% of tourism is located at the coast. And when I say at the coast, I mean, as I said before, literally mean at the coast. So 5 kilometers away from the coast is where 95% of all overnight stays and arrivals in Croatia happen. We do have some tourism in the hinterland, we do have some tourism in the continental part, but it's completely insignificant compared to what happens at the sea. Istria is the largest one, Split Dalmatia County is the second largest one, and the city of Dubrovnik, which is probably the biggest tourist brand in Croatia, is the one that attracts the highest number of tourists. So everything by the sea. And what I wanted to do is just to show you, very briefly, I will just skip through this, but to give you pictures more than text. I made a small analysis of where the accommodation is located. I took the Booking.com website, web scraped 3 different counties, one that has, or at least perception is that it has a strong inland tourism, which is Istria, and 2 that have national parks. One would be Lika-Senj County, which has the Plitvice Lakes, which is supposed to be a strong attractor, and the second one would be Šibenik-Knin County, which does have a national park, but it's closer to the sea. It's a river-based national park, but close to the sea. And let's see the results. So essentially, this is the outline of Istria. You can probably recognize the triangle of that. For those who are not from Croatia, it's a triangle-shaped peninsula. And you can only see the red dots, this is the heat map where most of the accommodation is placed. This is the major cities of Pula, of Poreč, Rovinj, Umag, and Opatija. So I didn't include Rijeka because it would maybe skew the picture a little bit. But as you can see, there is almost nothing inside. There is some tourist activities, but compared to the volume of everything else, it's completely littoral. Okay, maybe this is just to show you the wider the circle, the more accommodation there is. The widest circle is around the Pula area, followed by Rovinj, followed by Poreč, followed by Umag. And you can see that in the mainland there is some dots, but really not very significant. Similarly for the Lika-Senj County, but you can see one red dot there by the Plitvice Lakes. On the land, this is the cluster of circles to the right. This is just an illustration. I'm not going to get into more details on methodology unless somebody wants to discuss it. And this is Šibenik-Knin County. I must say that this looks more transparent on my presentation. There is a map behind it, but it doesn't really catch. But what you can see, there is a cluster that really follows the coast. And this is what it looks like around city of Šibenik, Vodice, Primošten, and just entering the city of Skradin, and then it stops. There is almost nothing in the mainland, a couple of accommodations in the city of Knin, Drniš, and so on, but it's really literally couple of those for every city. So again, very literal placement of tourism. So this is the important part. Cities and larger towns and tourist places on the coast. And then what we get when we get to the city level is, this is an animation that I'm going to show you, again scraped from the Booking.com website, but done before the outbreak of COVID, because that certainly introduced some breaks in the dates and so on. But I will show you the timeline of opening and registration of apartments, not hotels, not hostels, but private apartments registered at the Booking.com site in the city of Split. You will see the dynamic and you will see the geographical placement of all that. So this says time and space Split. There is the year down there. Okay, one more time, and then we will skip to the final picture. the green obviously the more recent. Now the 2017 explosion. Okay. And this is the final product. What you can see here is obviously there is this bay, the central area where the palace around which the city actually grew. It is the the highest concentration of accommodation is in that area, and the rest of it is pretty much again by the sea. There are some points in this middle part, but to the right and up, so in the outskirts of the city, there is almost none, which means that actually there are significant parts of the city which are actually excluded from tourism. And let's not forget, a large part of Croatian tourism of this type is actually a social measure for people who are actually using their apartments as resources to pretty much survive, or to use it as a mean to survive the summer with a higher income. And this is what happens with private accommodation. So essentially what we are getting here is a large pressure on the city center, which in turn results in depopulation of the city center. So people are moving out to the outskirts and moving to the parts where there are no dots. However, these dots are not the only thing that is missing there. What is missing there also is the public infrastructure, or infrastructure of any sort, medical infrastructure, educational infrastructure, all the way to more banal things like the ATM machines and so on and so on. Dentists, kindergartens, it's all concentrated again in these parts where you can see the dots. Works the same in the city of Zadar, in the city of Dubrovnik, even in the city of Zagreb, which is bigger, of course. It has a bigger dispersion of people, but the tourism enters every city in the same way. When we are talking about Rijeka, which is essentially somewhere around 2011 or 12 on this map, with the development of tourism, you can expect this in 5 to 10 years, I would say. So this is the process you are probably going to see, with one big difference, which I'm going to get to a bit later. Okay, and this is the big difference. This is the city of Zadar, and this is, as you can see, quite a recent development in the city of Zadar. These are residential buildings which are being built in huge numbers. This all, everything you can see in the front and all the way back, you can see a big number of recently built buildings. This is a sort of hybrid, I would say, approach to space. First of all, many of these buildings are built for tourism. That is one thing. And B, they are not built for the local people. So essentially, much more foreign capital that entered the city. And these buildings are using up the space of the city, but they are not really inclusive towards any local social infrastructure networks and so on, because the residents in there are temporary residents. So a majority of these buildings are being built for temporary residents within the city who actually don't have a pronounced need for any of significant social infrastructures, because they are here on pretty much on short-term stays, very often on time-sharing arrangements and so on and so on. But this used to be an area which was pretty much covered by, well, greenery, forest, or small houses, and now turned into this type of building. What you don't see in this picture is that the city of Zadar had a policy which pretty much allowed most of these buildings to use up the space almost completely. When you take into account the surface of the building itself, the surface of parking places and so on, there is almost no place left for trees, grass, shrubbery, or whatever of that sort, which for those who were following this sort of processes know that increases the heat, the amount of heat in the cities themselves. So the city itself is becoming more hot, changes the microclimate and so on top of these changes that I already described. Another look at that. This used to be all this used to be green like this in the forefront. Now it's construction yard with several large buildings, very close to the marina, which is owned by Doge Group from Turkey. They are not the investors in this, but usually the marina brings or attracts this sort of buildings. So usually for people who are actually the users of the marina. Another process of that sort. And again, the former picture, what you don't see, is this cluster of buildings stops where this picture starts. So we are talking about a kilometer of buildings that are being recently built with this policy of no green whatsoever required. So this is what we are talking about. At the same time, we are still witnessing the processes of apartmanization. So people who are living in the city that are turning their apartments in tourist apartments. However, again, we are describing the process in which people who live, in places like this is, somewhere between Italian period in 1920s and early socialism in the 60s. Here, this is, as you can see, a place of rather organized, socially organized living, quite a lot of tourist activity, again, of this private sort, compared to the other part of the city, where I was describing this process of exclusion from tourist economy, from infrastructure, and all other important characteristics of the city, which looks something like this. So I was riding on my bike and just taking pictures of the city to find a good example, and this one came to mind. As you can see, this is some sort of wild parking place. There is no designated place for pedestrians. The houses are almost unfinished, although people live in them, sometimes even for decades. And again, if I was to show you the map of Zadar, you would see that there is no doctor around that 2-kilometer radius. There are no schools, kindergartens, dentists, everything that actually makes some sort of requirement for decent living in this developmental sense. So essentially, when we talk about why tourism and where tourism, when we talk about the cities, we are talking about some of the problems. And the key problems, I would say, in urban environment connected to tourism is how we define the city. So is a city something that is connected to space in the sense that David Harvey would say? Is it a tourist city, academic city? Is it a city of infrastructure? And where do all these elements fit within the city? So where is their spatial place and what is their societal space and place? So what we are witnessing is that actually people are moving away from the center. They're moving to the periphery. Periphery is underdeveloped. So essentially we are having a mass of people who are moving to a lower standard of living and usually paying them above the Croatian average, still because they live in an expensive city. And why do they live in an expensive city? Well, because there is a lot of investment in central area, the old city, the coastal area, which actually raises the price of real estate everywhere. So even these plots of land and buildings that are built in underdeveloped areas of the city are quite expensive compared to some other cities. So the real estate is becoming increasingly expensive. And on the other hand, the people who move there are really constructed as second-rate citizens. So they are the local people from the city who do have some sort of emotional attachment to the city, some sort of tradition of living there, and they're actually being excluded from the city. So it is a process that comes with the economy, the urban economy of neoliberalism from the 80s, from English cities and so on, with a process of gentrification and so on. Although what we are witnessing here is based, of course, with tourism and the building sector that is involved with predominantly touristic orientation towards building. And what this brings us to is something that the literature calls the revanchist city, or the city which actually excluded the people who were or are emotionally attached to the city, who are local residents, and who are forced to live in in less developed parts of the city who are still under quite a high economical burden because of the steep price of the real estate, and who are at the same time segregated in this residential sense. So they are living in a less developed area. There is no investment in that part of the city or parts of the city. And what that usually brings is very often many different sorts of revolt, urban, even violence at some points, and usually unrest of all kinds, and the decrease in the quality of life for the local residents. So this is what happens. And why? Because investments are going and are targeting the places where people who are not residents and do not need local infrastructure to work for them are actually entering. And this is the place where all the infrastructure was placed anyway. The city center and the coastal area, which was the first area of inhabiting the city, and now we are having this pushback, in a sense, of people, which is also happening in the city of Rijeka, but I would say in a better way because it's more urbanized, the ring around the city. But we are not, I would say that this process is going to, if this process repeats in Rijeka, is going to repeat this process as well. And then we are going to see and witness even higher percent of people leaving the city, going to other places, which of course then brings a lot of problems. Not, as I said, not only violence and probably not violence, but people who are suffering from worse medical care, from worse access to education, worse public transportation, and so on and so on, and at the same time being excluded from, the place of the identification with the city. So I would say that these would be some elementary lessons from all the cities that were involved in this sort of touristification. I said jokingly before when talking to Davor that there are this, like in football, there are tiers, there are different leagues. Venice was the highest league, and they were the first to witness the process of touristification and cruising tourism. Then Dubrovnik was the second victim, that was the second league. Then we have witnessed that in Split, in Zadar, and now we are also witnessing in tourist sense the county league of Rijeka, which is aspiring to enter the higher league. Although, as I heard, in real football, they are quite good at the moment. But in this tourist football, they are still, rising through the ranks. And these are the problems you are probably going to face here in Rijeka. Okay, thanks for your attention.